Finding the right home care agency can be very overwhelming, but asking the right questions can make all the difference. Do you know what to ask to ensure that you're making the best choice?
Choosing a home care agency for yourself or a loved one is a very critical decision. But for many people with so many options out there, how do you know the one that will truly provide the care that you need?
Hi, I'm Marva Bailey.
And I'm Orrett Bailey. And today we're going to talk to you about how to choose the right home care agency. Before we get into the questions that we should ask, let's start with questions we should not ask. One of the first questions we get is, how much do you charge? And I may get in a little trouble here, but if you're starting with this question, then you do not care about the quality of care, because really cheaper is not better.
That's true. Here's a prime example of what happened recently. Family called us. The rate was an issue. So they said, they could get it cheaper. They went with a cheaper. 2 weeks in, they were calling us back. Can you come and help us? The quality is poor. And we were able to go in and just transform that case.
Right.
Cheaper is not always better.
Right. And you'll be surprised that that's a very common occurrence where people will make a choice based on a few dollars difference, but the quality of care is much less. The consistency of caregivers, different caregivers going in, the type of care that's provided. And so that's why we often encourage families. Why do you want to be conscious of what value you're receiving? Is to look at the total picture and not just what is your hourly rate. Now that we have talked about the question that you shouldn't ask or shouldn't start with, here are the questions that you should ask.
Yes. Number 1, are you licensed, bonded, and insured? You must verify that the agency is licensed, bonded, and insured to provide home care services in your area. This ensures 1, compliance with state regulations, and 2, it protects you from liability.
Here's why this is important. There's so many agencies popping up, and many of them aren't set up right. And so if something happens in your home, it may be a situation where they don't have any of these things in place, and then you're left holding the bag if a situation goes south. So that's one of the reasons it's important to ask this question and get this information up front. 2, how do you select and screen your caregivers? This is a very important question to ask because from our experience, stories from caregivers, we often hear many caregivers just get a phone call telling them about a case and then giving them an address over the phone to go somewhere. And so when you inquire about the agency's process for screening a caregiver, you get insight into potentially the type of caregiver you will receive, how closely they were vetted, and potentially the quality care you may receive from that caregiver.
And this is as real as it gets. I remember one of our wonderful caregivers, a case had ended, and in the interim, before we could get her placed, she picked up with a job with another agency. And she was just bewildered by the process. She got a call from a lady. She had applied, got a call from a lady to do a urine test, and that was it. Then the next call she got was to show up at this address, that this is a case. She got there. The man was belligerent and just saying, I don't know anything. I didn't ask for any caregivers, with 2 huge dogs. She turned around and she said, Miss Bailey, please, 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 I'm ready to come back because this is, and it was a real situation. She said, I've never seen anything like that. From the experience we have, we're going to be processing our caregivers through a 3-step process of interviews. That we're doing drug tests, we're doing a background screening with including a motor vehicle driving record check, especially if they have to drive the client. And we're doing competency assessments, and we're ensuring that they're trained.
Right. So I ask how they're being screened.
Number 3, are your caregivers trained and certified? So here in Alabama, for example, our caregivers are not required to be certified, but we insist on ensuring that our caregivers are trained and adequately equipped for whatever care level that's needed in, a particular case. You need to be asking this of your home care agency that you're interviewing, that you're calling to set up service. Ask about the qualifications, the training, the certifications of caregivers. Ensure that they have the necessary skills and experience to meet your specific needs.
Right. Number 4, do you provide ongoing training for your caregivers? This is a critical question. Marva just talked about ensuring that caregivers receive training coming in. But one thing we realize from being in this business for a while is that ongoing training is critical because client needs change.
Yes.
And things evolve in a given situation. When a caregiver is with a senior for a long period of time, often their health will decline and their needs will change.
Right.
And so ongoing training is needed for them to be able to continue to provide high quality of care. And you want to understand what that looks like for the caregiving company, whether or not they have that in place.
So we had an actual client with that experience, had Lewy body dementia, which is a debilitating condition. And he went from walking to being bedbound.
Right.
Our question, our role in this aspect of care is to ensure that the caregiver is adequately equipped to continue providing the care. So one of the first questions when we had a change in the care needs, this is happening. Are you comfortable moving forward with this client? One in particular, I was just really impressed with her. She said, show me, Miss Bailey, teach me. And we were able to teach because it was a different level of care. It's bedbound care. And she was willing to learn. And she learned all the way, became one of our top caregivers because she was open to being trained and equipped as the care needs, evolved.
So here's a practical benefit for you as a family member is that when ongoing training is provided to the caregiver, you won't need to find a new caregiver in later stages as your loved one may decline, because the caregiver that is there is receiving the training that they need to continue caring for your loved one. And that's such a better situation than having to find someone new later on in the process.
So you want to inquire about the agency's commitment to ongoing training and professional development for caregivers. And this is how you're going to ensure that caregivers stay up to date on best practices and the emerging trends in home care. And we stay on top of that. Number 5, what is your policy for replacing caregivers if needed? We just got that question in an assessment Friday. And what do you do if the caregiver isn't working out, or if something happens, the caregiver is ill, that, they can't come? And that's where I think is a key place for home care agencies for that you're looking to utilize for your services. You need to understand the agency's policy for replacing caregivers in case of illness, scheduling conflicts, or unforeseen circumstances. And you have to ensure that there is a plan in place to maintain continuity of care. So say your loved one lives with you, your senior loved one, and you have to get to work. It's 8:00, no one showed up. What do? Here is where, if this become a chronic situation, or if we need to pull that caregiver altogether, or if it's just an issue for that day where the caregiver cannot be, illness or something happening with family, then we get a replacement, a comparable replacement caregiver in that spot.
Right. And this is important for your peace of mind, because understanding what will happen positions you to know what to expect. And oftentimes families don't think of those emergencies that will happen that Marva talked about. But think of it, you're getting ready to go to work and all of a sudden the caregiver can't come or something else happens and you're in a situation. If you aren't aware of what to expect or what will happen, it becomes a source of frustration for you. And you may have one thing that you think that will happen or should happen, but the agency has a total different way of doing it. And so understanding that up front better equips you to make a decision that's going to best suit the way that you prefer to work.
And I just want to say, because in that assessment we did, we heard the lady saying, I've had this other agency and I'm here and the person just doesn't show. No call, no show. And I promise you, I'm not going to promise that we will never have such a situation. But what I can promise you is that we'll be aware of that situation.
Just to follow up with what Marva is saying, we have technology in place that knows when a caregiver clocks in or not, and we're able to track and respond in reasonable time so that we can make those changes if needed to have a replacement caregiver in. The other aspect of that is our supervision process, or with our supervisor following up with the shifts, we're also able to respond and have replacement caregivers as needed in that situation. So we have a structure in place that's going to provide that for families so that they don't have to worry about that. Number 6 question, how do you ensure quality care? What makes you different from other agencies?
We did a whole video on this Pathlight promise. We have 6 of them here, and I'll just read through them quickly. Number 1, we promise that we thoroughly vet our caregivers.
Number 2, we promise our caregivers are adequately trained.
Number 3, we promise that our caregivers are orientated to your unique situation.
Number 4, we promise ongoing supervision.
And number 5, we promise to have strong communication.
Number 6, we promise to quickly resolve any issue that arise.
And that's our promise. Pathlight promise.
So if you're considering care for a loved one and would like to learn more about Pathlight, go to pathlightseniorcare.com and you can set an in-home assessment where we can come out and talk with you more, give you information so that you can make the best decision for your family.